Section 80. Released on July 2nd, 2011, this was Kendrick Lamar's first official studio album, dropped through Top Dog Entertainment with no big label backers, just digital-only distribution through the iTunes Store. The name mixes Section 8 housing with the 80s generation, hinting at the concept, stories from a community caught between systemic neglect and survival. This wasn't some flashy debut either. It opened at number 113 on the Billboard 200, selling just 5,400 copies that first week, but it didn't fizzle out. By 2017, the album hit gold certification from the Recording Industry Association of America. 16 tracks fill out a 60-minute runtime, landing somewhere between conscious hip-hop and alternative rap. The sound pulls from jazz, boom bap, southern hip-hop, and even down-tempo psych elements. Lamar wrote a good chunk of it in his mom's kitchen and on his tour bus, leaning into a process that let things breathe. He'd leave songs sitting for days or weeks before finishing them. Production came mostly from Digi plus Phonics. The in-house crew, made up of Soundwave, Tay Beast, and Willie B, but there were outside producers too, like THC, Wildfire, Terrace Martin, and even J. Cole. The whole thing was tracked at Top Dog Studios in Carson, California. This wasn't an album made to fit in. Lamar chose not to lean on Dr. Dre, despite having him as a mentor. Instead, he crafted a loose narrative following two women, Keisha and Tammy, using them to explore themes like trauma, gender dynamics, and social decay. The storytelling opens up with "Fuck Your Ethnicity" and doesn't let go. You've got pieces on substance abuse, like ADHD, deep social critique in Ronald Reagan era, and raw tragedy in Keisha's song. These tracks don't sugarcoat anything. They sit with discomfort. One big theme is how the crack epidemic wrecked communities, especially black ones, in the 1980s. Kendrick points fingers at policies that cut Section 8 housing and fueled long-term poverty. The song Ronald Reagan Era is just one place that comes through, but the message hits across the album. High Power pushes back too, borrowing inspiration from civil rights leaders to encourage self-awareness and unity. The features are pretty spread out. There's GLC, Colin Monroe, BJ the Chicago Kid, Ab-Soul, Schoolboy Q, and even uncredited vocals from RZA. Alori Joe provided background vocals across several tracks. The spiteful chant with Schoolboy Q eventually got pulled from streaming because of an unlicensed sample. That kind of thing happens when legal paperwork and creativity don't talk to each other. This album wasn't made for hit singing. High Power was the only one released and it didn't chart, but that didn't matter. It made a statement. Lamar even claimed in a statement that he was ordered to write it, though that was probably symbolic. The track was produced by J. Cole and ended up defining the tone of the whole project. No chart placement, no problem. Sales picked up slowly. By October of 2012, Section 80 had sold 78,000 copies. Over time, it reached 420,000 equivalent units. That's some serious long-term growth. Critics paid attention too. Pitchfork ranked it number 45 on their Best Albums of the Year list. Complex had it at number 7. NME went big, placing it 3rd on their list of 100 albums to hear before dying. That's a huge look for a debut record. Now, not everything aged great. Some listeners have called out No Makeup and Tammy's song for being too preachy or tone deaf when it comes to women's issues. Those critiques hold weight, and they've stuck over time. Still, that doesn't drag down the album's broader impact. This thing carved space for Lamar as a storyteller and social observer, something that most artists couldn't pull off on a first album. The visuals stirred up conversation too. The album art shows a Bible, marijuana, a lighter, and bullets. Some took offense, thinking it was a shot at religion. Lamar later cleared that up, saying it wasn't meant to disrespect anyone's beliefs. Still, that kind of symbolism matched the album's tension, how faith, violence, and survival all crash into each other in the same households. Samples helped build the vibe. Keisha's song, pulled from the Alan Parsons Project. Rigor Mortis took from Willie Jones III. ADHD sampled a track by the Jet Age of Tomorrow, but didn't credit it. That loose approach to sample clearance backfired on the spiteful chant. It ended up getting yanked off major platforms in 2019. This project also opened doors. Dr. Dre, The Game, and Snoop Dogg declared Lamar the new king of the West Coast. He joined XXL's freshman class in 2011 with Mac Miller, Lil B, and YG. The album made it clear he wasn't chasing hits, he was laying the groundwork for something way bigger. Section 80 didn't try to be flawless, and Lamar later called it goofy, but it set the tone for everything that followed. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm gonna be posting every day. Thanks. Anyways, Good Kid, M.A.A.D City, released in late October of 2012. This was Kendrick Lamar's first major label album and came out through Top Dog Entertainment, Aftermath Entertainment, and Interscope Records. Unlike his debut, this one had physical and digital formats and a full industry push. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and sold 242,000 copies in its first week. That was a huge jump from Section 80, and it topped the Billboard Top R&B and Hip Hop Albums chart. By February 2025. It reached around 3,700,000 in equivalent album units. Not bad for something framed as a short film. It's a semi-autobiographical story about growing up in Compton. The acronym in the title has multiple meanings: My Angry Adolescence Divided and My Angels on Angel Dust. The album takes listeners through Lamar's teenage years, filled with run-ins with gang culture, peer pressure, and moments of redemption. It opens with a voicemail from his parents and unfolds through skits, confrontations, and deeply personal reflections. It doesn't play like a collection of songs. It plays like a day in the life. The standard version runs about 68 minutes with 12 tracks, while the deluxe version adds 5 more and brings it to over 87 minutes. Production came from both inside and outside. TDE, Digi plus Phonics, handled a chunk of it, while heavyweight names like Dr. Dre, Hit Boy, Just Blaze, Williams, Scoop DeVille, and DJ Dahi filled out the rest. The tracks were recorded all over California, in studios from Carson to Burbank to Los Angeles. Mixing was done by Dr. Dre and Derek Alley, and Brian Gardner handled the mastering. The concept sticks tightly to the storyline. It starts with Shireen and ends in Compton, with plenty of twists in between. Each track pushes the narrative forward. The Art of Peer Pressure lays out how easily things spiral. Good Kid and M.A.A.D City contrast innocence with environment. Swimming Pools critiques the culture of drinking while sounding like a party track. Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst takes a 12-minute dive into mortality, legacy, and faith. Samples pop up throughout the album. There's Janet Jackson's Anytime, Any Place on Poetic Justice. Beach House's Silver Soul shows up on Money Trees. Grant Green's Maybe Tomorrow appears in Sing About Me. Even Boom Clap Bachelors get pulled in for Bitch, Don't Kill My Vibe. Kendrick never wastes a sample. They're always part of the story. And even though Dr. Dre was executive producer, Lamar avoided relying too much on his sound. He kept his own voice at the center. The guest features didn't feel like filler. J-Rock slid into Money Trees with a verse that held weight. Drake added a melodic touch to Poetic Justice. Anna Wise appeared more than once, bringing vocals to Real and Sing About Me. MC8 added raw presence to M.A.A.D City. The deluxe version brought in Dr. Dre again for The Recipe, and Mary J. Blige for Now or Never. The skits were voiced by Lamar's real parents and friends, adding a dose of realism. Whether it's his dad yelling about a lost Domino's coupon or the baptism scene near the end, every piece ties into the story. It all flows chronologically, starting with a bad decision and ending in redemption. Critical reception was massive. Metacritic gave it a 91. Rolling Stone called it a masterpiece. Pitchfork gave it a near-perfect 9.5. Complex ranked it 3rd for the year. It earned Grammy nominations in categories like Album of the Year and Best Rap Album. It also pulled nods for Best Rap Sung Collaboration and Best Music Video. The only real knock was the heavy use of skits, which some felt broke up the pacing, but most critics agreed it raised the bar for hip-hop storytelling. Sales-wise, it kept growing. By 2016, 1.7 million copies were sold in the US. It hit number 16 on the UK chart and number 2 in Canada. By 2025, it hit 3,700,000 units total, and the streams didn't slow down. Money Trees passed 1 billion plays on Spotify. Swimming Pools and Bitch, Don't Kill My Vibe both cleared 500 million. The cultural impact went far beyond charts. Lamar helped bring conscious rap and West Coast sound back into the mainstream. This album didn't just influence fans, it changed the way other rappers thought about albums. Artists like J. Cole and Travis Scott took notes. The Library of Congress added it to the National Recording Registry in 2022. It even hit number 1 on Rolling Stone's 50 Greatest Hip-Hop Albums list in 2020. Lamar said he wanted it to feel like a movie, and it does. Every track, every skit, every feature builds a bigger picture. The album draws from real life, but filters it through a lens that makes it hit hard. Whether it's Compton's gang history, broken families, or internal guilt, nothing feels made up. It's gritty, it's cinematic, and it doesn't blink. It doesn't need a happy ending, just a true one. To Pimp a Butterfly, released in March of 2015, Kendrick Lamar's 3rd studio album came out through Top Dog Entertainment, Aftermath Entertainment, and Interscope Records. It dropped on physical formats like CD and vinyl, along with digital platforms. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and moved 324,000 copies in the first week. It also topped the Billboard Top R&B and Hip Hop Albums chart. By February of 2025, it had around 2,600,000 equivalent units in the US alone. The album's built like a poetic journey. It covers African American identity, systemic racism, self-worth, survivor's guilt, and the strain of fame. Lamar pulled from his own life, mixed it with Black history, and created something both personal and political. The title references To Kill a Mockingbird, hinting at the exploitation of Black culture. Throughout the album, Lamar recites a spoken word poem that builds piece by piece, finally ending with a fictional conversation with Tupac Shakur. There are 16 tracks in total, including 2 interludes. The runtime lands just under 79 minutes. The production came from a wide list of names: TDE's Core Squad, Soundwave, Terrace Martin, Thundercat, and Rocky provided the bass. They were joined by Flying Lotus, L. Williams, Knixwillage, Boy One Day, and more. It was recorded mostly in 2014 at several studios across Los Angeles and Santa Monica. Mixing was handled by Derek Alley, and mastering came from Mike Bozzi. The opener, Wesley's Theory, samples Boris Gardner's Everyone is a Star and features George Clinton and Thundercat. It kicks things off with themes around Black success and exploitation. King Kunta brought in James Brown, Michael Jackson, and Mousberg samples to hammer home its critique of power structures. All Right took pieces from Fred Wesley and the JB and became a protest anthem during the Black Lives Matter movement. Other samples included Wishful Thinking by Lala Hathaway on Mama, That Lady by the Isley Brothers on I, and a Fela Kuti track on Mortal Man. The last track stretches past 12 minutes, tying together the album's messages with historical references and a surprise audio clip of Tupac from a 1994 interview. The guest list is stacked, but intentional. You get George Clinton, Bilal, Anna Wise, Snoop Dogg, Ronald Isley, Lala Hathaway, Rhapsody, and even Jamaican artist Assassin. Tupac appears posthumously via interview audio. Whitney Alford, Lamar's fiancée, is heard in King Kunta. The features never steal focus. They add depth to what's already there. Tracks like You and How Much a Dollar cost cut deep. You dives into depression, self-hate, and guilt. How Much a Dollar Costs tells a parable about a homeless man that turns into a spiritual reckoning. The Blacker the Berry doesn't hold back, addressing internalized racism and social double standards. These walls mixes sensuality with deeper commentary on incarceration and cycles of pain. The themes are thick, but they're never thrown in just to sound deep. They all serve a purpose. The critical reception was huge. It got a 96 on Metacritic. Rolling Stone called it fiery and fearless. Pitchfork gave it a 9.3 and labeled it kaleidoscope. The New York Times said it was dense and expansive. It won big at the Grammys in 2016. Best Rap Album, Best Rap Performance, Best Rap Song, and Best Rap Sung Collaboration. All Right alone took 3 awards and picked up a nomination for Song of the Year. Sales followed the acclaim. It hit platinum in the US by April 2017. The UK certified it gold. It reached #1, not just in the US, but also in Canada, Australia, and the UK. Even though its sound was experimental, it didn't scare off listeners. Some critics did say it might be too dense or abstract for casual fans, but most agreed it pushed boundaries in the right direction. The impact reached way beyond music. All Right became a rally cry during protests. Lamar performed a medley at the Grammys that critics called unforgettable. Barack Obama said How Much a Dollar Cost was his favorite song of 2015. The Library of Congress preserved the album in its National Recording Registry in 2020. It hit #1 on Pitchfork's Best Albums of the Decade list and was placed 19th on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums ever. Lamar went on the Kunta's Groove Sessions tour in 2015, hitting small venues with an intimate setup. The tour later expanded globally with the To Pimp, a Butterfly World Tour, and the streaming numbers? Massive. All Right crossed over 1 billion streams. King Kunta and I also broke past 500 million each. It didn't just change Lamar's career, it reshaped what a hip-hop album could sound like. Untitled Unmastered. Released in early March of 2016, this was Kendrick Lamar's surprise compilation album, shared with no lead-up and minimal polish. The tracks were taken from the To Pimp a Butterfly sessions and dropped with little editing, no official song titles, and no radio-ready mastering. Despite the raw nature, it debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 and sold 178,000 equivalent units in its first week. That included 128,000 pure album sales. By February 2025, it had reached around 600,000 equivalent units in the US. There are only 8 tracks, and the runtime is just over 34 minutes. The songs are named by date, reflecting their recording session timelines. This stripped-down style emphasizes the creative process over final product polish. The concept stays in the same zone as To Pimp a Butterfly, exploring Black identity, social injustice, spirituality, and personal growth. But here it's looser and more experimental. The unfinished quality isn't a gimmick. it's the point. The production crew includes plenty of familiar names. You've got TDE's Soundwave, Terrace Martin, Thundercat, and Young Exclusive, plus contributions from Cardo, Frank Dukes, DJ Khalil, Swiss Beats, Adrian Young, and Ali Shaheed Muhammad. Egypt Dean, Swiss Beats' son, even got a credit. Some tracks feature multiple producers blending live, jazz, funk grooves, and hip-hop beats with minimal layering. Mixing came from Derek Ali, but the album wasn't fully mastered, except for the vinyl, which Mike Bozzi handled. Track 1, Untitled, 01 opens with chaotic horns, biblical themes, and apocalyptic urgency. Anna Wise lends uncredited vocals here. Track 2, Untitled 02 dives into Lamar's paranoia and reflections on fame, with production from Terrace Martin and Antidote. Track 3, Untitled 03 features Bilal, Anna Wise, and Thundercat, and samples The Honey Drippers Impeach the President. That one takes aim at racial stereotypes and culture vultures. Untitled 04 is short and stripped back, clocking under 2 minutes. It pushes self-worth and education. Track 5, Untitled 05, runs over 5 minutes and features J-Rock, Punch, and Anna Wise. This one's loaded with commentary on police violence and systemic oppression. Untitled 06 takes a softer route. CeeLo Green appears here, and it samples Zapp's Computer Love to explore vulnerability and romantic struggles. Track 7, Untitled 07, is the longest at over 8 minutes. It was stitched together from multiple sessions and touches on ambition, indulgence, and deeper reflections. Egypt Dean provided uncredited vocals here, making him the youngest credited voice on a Lamar project. The final track, Untitled 08, is often called Blue Faces by fans because of its lyrics. It ends the project on a hopeful, socially aware note, built on a bouncy groove and calls for self-discipline. Guest appearances across the album stay pretty consistent. Anna Wise appears multiple times. Thundercat and Bilal show up on Untitled 03. J-Rock, Punch, and CeeLo Green all have featured moments. But like the music itself, the credits are subtle and low-key, often going unannounced unless you dig through the liner notes or production breakdowns. The themes stay heavy. Systemic racism gets a spotlight in track 5. Black identity and stereotypes come through strong in track 3. Untitled 01 is full of spiritual dread, mixing fire and brimstone language with modern issues. Untitled 07 is part victory lap, part confession booth. Even without a traditional narrative, the themes overlap and build a bigger picture. The dated titles help map out Lamar's thoughts over time, showing how certain ideas stayed with him across years. The critical reception was strong. Metacritic gave it an 87. Pitchfork called it a vital piece of Lamar's catalog and rated it an 8.7. Rolling Stone and The Guardian each gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The main knock was its lack of cohesion, which makes sense for a demo collection, but the rawness was what most reviewers liked. It wasn't just leftovers, it was another piece of the bigger vision. No singles were officially released, but the songs didn't stay hidden. Untitled 08 picked up traction on streaming services. Untitled 07 became the most played track, passing 300 million Spotify streams by 2023. Lamar performed Untitled 05 at the Grammys and had already teased other tracks on late night shows like The Colbert Report and The Tonight Show. That exposure built curiosity, and fans demanded more. The album art matches the vibe. It's just a dark green square with no text, no graphics, and no artist name. Simple, muted, and intentionally blank. Physical versions included minimal liner notes and no flashy packaging. It was a direct reflection of the music, raw, quiet, but full of weight if you paid attention. The release came after a tweet from LeBron James asking for the unreleased track. The next day, it was live. The move felt casual, but the impact wasn't. It showed Lamar was willing to break norms and share works in progress. Some fans wondered if it was a quick cash grab, but critics pointed to its intention and execution. It never felt sloppy. It felt stripped down on purpose. Lamar toured with many of the songs during his Kunta's Groove Sessions and The Damn tour. He didn't treat them like B-sides, and even though this was technically a compilation, Untitled Unmastered became a blueprint for how to share art without filters, keeping it personal, timely, and fearless. Damn, released in mid-April of 2017, Kendrick Lamar's 4th studio album marked a shift toward more concise, focused storytelling, while still holding on to the weighty themes he'd become known for. It came out through Top Dog Entertainment, Aftermath Entertainment, and Interscope Records in physical and digital formats. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 and sold 603,000 equivalent album units in its first week, including 353,000 in pure album sales. It topped the Billboard top R&B and hip-hop albums chart, and by February 2025, it hit around 4,500,000 equivalent units in the US. The concept explores morality, duality, faith, and personal trials, all told through a structure that can be played both forward and backward. The collector's edition flips the track list, offering a narrative arc that starts with redemption and ends in vulnerability. That structure adds layers to themes like wickedness versus weakness, pride versus humility, and trust versus betrayal. Lamar aimed to capture the tension between fame and faith, violence and peace, power and fear. It runs just under 55 minutes across 14 tracks. Production came from a combination of TDE's core talent, Soundwave, DJ Dahi, Terrace Martin, and outside contributors like M.A.A.D, Ninth Wonder, The Alchemist, James Blake, Bad Bad Not Good, and Greg Kurstin. Tracks were recorded from 2016 to 2017 at studios in New York and Santa Monica. Mixing was done by Derek Ali, and mastering came from Mike Bozzi at Bernie Grundman. The album opens with Blood, a 2-minute track where Lamar narrates a story that ends in gunfire, symbolizing the beginning of a moral descent. DNA explodes right after, produced by M.A.A.D and sampling Rick James's Mary Jane. Ya is more subdued and reflective, sampling Mortal Man from Lamar's previous album. Element features vocals from Kid Capri and brings in James Blake on production. Phil tackles isolation and emotional numbness. Using a sample from O.A.T. Smith's Stormy, the first major guest appears on Loyalty, with Rihanna delivering the hook on a track exploring trust and relationship dynamics. Pride, produced by Steve Lacy, brings in a dreamy sound, while Humble flips it entirely, landing as the album's most aggressive cut. It was produced by M.A.A.D and became Lamar's first #1 single on the Billboard Hot 100. The beat is stark, the message is blunt, and the video pushed it into cultural saturation. Lust features vocals from Kaitranada and deals with repetition and desire. Love is lighter in tone and features Zakari, exploring emotional vulnerability and commitment. XXX drops a political hammer, with U2 stepping in on the chorus and a James Brown sample adding to the tension. Fear, the album's longest track, runs over 7 minutes and dives deep into trauma, parenting, and generational anxiety. It pulls from the Book of Deuteronomy and features vocals by Charles Edward Sidney Isom Jr. God mixes boastfulness and reverence, sampling Marvin Gaye's God is Love. The final track, Duckworth, ties Lamar's origin to that of Top Dog Entertainment, telling the true story of how a chance decision by label founder Anthony Tiffin changed Lamar's life. Produced by Ninth Wonder, it ends with a beat switch and the sound of a tape rewinding, closing the loop. Thematically, each song name reflects a singular concept: pride, fear, love, etc. That design makes each track a meditation on that idea. Humble calls out performative behavior. XXX throws punches at American politics and police brutality. Feel captures the numbness that comes with success. Lamar uses biblical references throughout, anchoring the album in spiritual conflict. It's less experimental than To Pimp a Butterfly, but just as intentional. Critics loved it. Metacritic gave it a 95. Pitchfork rated it 9.2, calling it unapologetic. The Guardian gave it a perfect 5. Rolling Stone called it a mix of timeless and modern. It won Best Rap Album at the 2018 Grammys, plus Best Rap Song and Best Rap Performance for Humble, and Best Rap Sung Performance for Loyalty. Humble also got nods for Record and Song of the Year. Then came the Pulitzer. In 2018, Damn became the first non-classical or jazz album to win the Pulitzer Prize for Music. That win stunned the industry and cemented Lamar's place beyond just hip-hop. He followed the release with the Damn Tour, which brought in over $40 million with openers like Travis Scott and YG. The album's singles dominated streaming platforms. Humble has over 2 billion plays on Spotify, and DNA and Love each crossed 1 billion. Damn wasn't about flaunting artistry, it was about refining it. It captured a moment, told a story forward and backward, and forced conversations about identity, morality, and legacy. Black Panther album. Released in early February of 2018, this was Kendrick Lamar's curated soundtrack for Marvel Studios' Black Panther. The album featured a blend of original songs written for or inspired by the film, and debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 with 154,000 equivalent units sold in the first week. Certified platinum by August that year, it had reached around 2 million equivalent units in the US by February 2025. It was distributed digitally with physical formats like CD and vinyl, arriving in May. Lamar served as executive producer and featured on every track, sometimes vocally, other times through ad-libs. The project was built around the ideological clash between T'Challa and Killmonger, with Lamar channeling both viewpoints through the lyrics. This wasn't just a movie tie-in, it was a parallel universe rooted in Black empowerment, diaspora identity, and African musical influences. Production was handled by a powerhouse lineup, including Soundwave, Al Shook, Ludwig Göransson, Mike Will Made It, DJ Dahi, Bad Bad Not Good, Frank Dukes, Cardo, and others. Recording took place mostly in the second half of 2017 during Lamar's Damn Tour. Mixing was done by Derek Alley and mastering by Mike Bozzi. The 14 tracks vary in tone and influence. It starts with Black Panther, where Lamar raps as T'Challa, expressing the burden of legacy. All the Stars follows, pairing Lamar with SZA on a cinematic, emotionally charged track that plays over the film's end credits. EX, featuring Schoolboy Q, 2 Chainz, and Saudi, delivers heavy verses over hypnotic production. The Ways, with Khalid and Sway Lee, is more melodic and romantic. Ops cranks the energy back up, as Vince Staples and Eugen Blackrock bring sharp verses over Göransson's production, appearing during the film's car chase. Georgia Smith's I Am slows things down with a powerful reflection on identity and sacrifice. SOBX, RBE show up on Paramedic, which leans into defiance, and West Coast braggadocio. Bloody Waters features Ab-Soul, Anderson .Paak, and James Blake, tackling redemption and struggle with layered instrumentation. King's Dead blends chaotic verses and wild beat switches from J-Rock, Kendrick, Future, and James Blake, mirroring Killmonger's anarchic mindset. Redemption Interlude by Zakari leads into the Jiko Kiam-inspired Redemption, featuring South African star Babes, Vodumo, and uncredited vocals by Mampincha. Seasons, with Mazi, Siava, and Reason, dives into diaspora perspectives, switching between English and Zulu. Big Shot brings in Travis Scott for a flashy, flute-driven anthem. The closing track, Pray For Me, with The Weeknd, mirrors T'Challa's inner conflict, mixing heroism with self-doubt. Lamar's fingerprints are all over this. Even when he's not on the hook or verse, his presence is felt in the transitions, energy, and theme. It's one of the rare cases where a rapper functioned as both artist and narrative guide for a blockbuster film. Ryan Coogler, the film's director, brought Lamar in after Damn released, and what started as a few songs quickly became a full concept album after Lamar screened an early cut of the movie. Themes are driven by duality, identity, conflict, and cultural pride. Black Panther and King's Dead are ideological opposites. All, The Stars and Pray For Me, wrestle with sacrifice and leadership. Seasons and Redemption tie into African musical roots, honoring the film's Afrofuturist setting. The album draws on everything from Wakandan lore to modern Black struggle, creating a layered soundscape that functions with or without the film. Critics were largely positive. Metacritic gave it an 80. Rolling Stone and NME both gave it 4 stars. AllMusic called it a strong marriage of Hollywood and real-world politics. The Guardian was more reserved, giving it 3 stars and noting the uneven pacing. One major criticism was the lack of broader global Black representation. Many thought artists from places like Brazil or Jamaica could have added depth. The Grammy results were a mixed bag. It was nominated for Album of the Year and Song of the Year, but didn't win. However, King's Dead did take home Best Rap Song and Best Rap Performance, and All the Stars picked up multiple nominations. The soundtrack also helped Lamar maintain cultural momentum after Damn, reinforcing his role as a curator of both music and message. Visually, the album cover was minimalist, a black background with a silver necklace modeled after T'Chaka's suit. It reflected power, restraint, and lineage, just like the film. The art was designed by Nicholas Draper Ivey, who built a career on fan designs before being tapped for this official work. Tracks like Ops and Pray For Me appear in the movie itself, while others are just inspired by its world. Ops plays during one of the film's high-energy chase scenes, boosting its intensity. The album blends seamlessly into the Black Panther universe, but it also stands on its own as a major musical release, independent of the Marvel machine. In the years since, its legacy has only grown. All the Stars now has over 1,500,000,000 Spotify streams. Pray For Me and King's Dead aren't far behind. The project proved that a superhero soundtrack could be serious art and reshaped expectations for music tied to blockbuster films. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Kendrick dropped this double album on May 13th, 2022, and it didn't take long for it to rocket straight to #1 on the Billboard 200. In its first week alone, they moved nearly 300,000 units, with over 35,000 of those being pure album sales. By early 2025, that total ballooned to around 1.8 million in the United States. It also went gold a few months after release. They definitely didn't hold back on the concept either. This thing dives into therapy, infidelity, spirituality, fatherhood, and all kinds of accountability. Split across 2 discs with 9 tracks each. It's all about Kendrick facing his own flaws and trying to lead others through theirs. Production was stacked. Soundwave, Dahi, Boy Wonder, Pharrell, The Alchemist, Baby Keem, and even the Donuts all contributed. And the sessions weren't done in one spot. They bounced around from Los Angeles to Santa Monica and beyond between 2020 and 2022. The sound blends conscious hip-hop, jazz rap, progressive rap, and even R&B, which really comes through with all the live piano, strings, and tap dancing layered into the beats. That tap dancing wasn't random either. It was done by Ronald Lil Ronnie McNair Jr., and it's sprinkled through the album like a metronome for Kendrick's internal dialogue. There's no shortage of guest appearances either. Blast and Amanda Reifer show up on Die Hard, Summer Walker, and Ghostface Killah appear on Purple Hearts, and Taylor Page is featured on We Cry Together. Kodak Black's involvement definitely sparked a reaction, especially with his vocals on Silent Hill and Rich Interlude. Sampha makes an appearance on Father Time, and Beth Gibbons from Portishead shows up on Mother I Sober. There's even narration from Kendrick's fiancée, Whitney Alford. They really stacked the deck for this one. Every track is laced with layers. United in Grief kicks it off with a look at therapy and loss. Rich Spirit tackles self-worth. We Cry Together throws listeners straight into a toxic relationship in meltdown mode. Then you've got Father Time unpacking masculinity through a father-son lens. It doesn't get lighter either. Mother I Sober is a raw dive into abuse and healing, and Mirror closes the album by choosing self-love over saving the world. Throughout the whole thing, Kendrick's wrestling with everything from trauma to fake heroes to spirituality, and he's not sugarcoating any of it. The samples are deep cuts. Worldwide Steppers flips a track by the Funkies. Die Hard uses a piece from the 21st century. Father Time grabs from the Edwards generation, and Anti-Diaries borrows from Rodney O and Joe Cooley. Mother I Sober lifts from the Ligidou sisters. All of it fits right into the emotional and cultural tones of each song. And it's not just for aesthetics. It ties directly into the themes of family, identity, and healing. Critics mostly praised it, even with all the weight it carries. Metacritic scored it 80 out of 100. Rolling Stone gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Pitchfork hit it with a 7.6, pointing out how dense it is. And The Guardian went all in with a perfect 5 stars, calling it fearlessly complex. The album snagged Grammy wins for Best Rap Album, Best Rap Performance, and Best Music Video. Even with some backlash over certain tracks, it didn't slow down the cultural impact. Kendrick promoted it through the Big Steppers tour across 2022 and 2023, and it brought in over $110 million. 95 became the most streamed track, hitting over 1 billion streams, while Silent Hill and Die Hard passed 500 million each. The whole thing was wrapped up in an album cover that showed Kendrick holding his daughter with Whitney and their son behind it. No flashy lights, just a quiet family moment, echoing the vulnerability laced through every track. GNX, Kendrick's 6th album, hit on November 22nd, 2024, and it landed like a missile. It debuts at #1 on the Billboard 200 with 319,000 units in its first week. By February 2025, it had already reached 1 million equivalent units in the United States. But this one wasn't just about stats. It was a straight-up flex, titled after the Grand National Experimental, a rare Buick from 1987. It doubled as a nod to Kendrick's personal past and a love letter to Los Angeles. And yeah, the release came right after his heated run with Drake, but the album kept those jabs subtle, never turning into a diss parade. Production-wise, it was stacked again. Kendrick teamed up with Soundwave and Jack Antonoff, who helped shape the whole thing into a fusion of West Coast nostalgia and new wave trap. Other producers like Mustard, Cardo, Kamasi Washington, and Dahi also played a role. The vibe was classic G-Funk with a twist, gritty synths, thick bass lines, and even mariachi influences thanks to Dara Barrera. She appears on 3 tracks after Kendrick spotted her at a Dodgers game. Talk about a wild card edition that paid off. Every song leaned into LA culture or Kendrick's legacy. Whacked Out murals kicked it off, featuring Barrera and painting a vivid picture of Compton pride. Luther with Caesar didn't just hit #1, it slapped the charts with purpose. Heart Part 6 reclaimed Kendrick's infamous song series with some quiet venom. Then there's Peekaboo with Achiki, bringing that local grit front and center. Even TV Off dropped a line about the GNX itself. All I ever wanted was a black Grand National. Not exactly subtle. The album didn't follow a heavy narrative like Mr. Morale, but it was still locked in thematically. The GNX stood as a symbol throughout: power, legacy, exclusivity. Tracks like Reincarnated and Man at the Garden looked inward, while Squabble Up and Loud went straight for celebration and dominance. That last one, featuring Roddy Ricch and Ink, kept the energy sky high. And the Super Bowl performance? Kendrick lit it up with Luther, Peekaboo, and TV Off. That halftime set pulled in over 133 million viewers. Commercially, the album didn't miss. It hit #1 in Canada, #3 in the UK, and #4 in Australia. Squabble Up and Luther both topped the Billboard Hot 100. TV Off cracked the top 10. Peekaboo broke the top 20. Whacked Out Murals was streamed over 5 million times in a single day. By April 2025, the album was pulling in over 9 million daily Spotify streams. Critics were all over it in a good way. Metacritic scored it 87 out of 100. Rolling Stone praised the G-Funk energy, and Billboard shouted out the underground artists that finally got a spotlight. Vulture said it was more accessible than his last project, even if it didn't shoot for the same level of complexity. Some critics wanted more risk, but others were just glad Kendrick finally leaned back into his West Coast roots. And speaking of that West Coast pride, the guests told the story. You had Ashike, Wally the Sensei, Dodie Six, Payson, and Young Threat all over it. Sam Dew returned for Squabble Up and Man at the Garden. The mariachi touches on Dodger Blue, Reincarnated, and Whacked Out Murals gave the project a distinct LA flavor that actually worked. Throw in Kamasi Washington on the sax, and yeah, the whole thing felt cinematic. No surprise, it's already shaping up as one of the most talked about albums of Kendrick's career. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.